the McAllen mission, it's actually very unique in a lot of ways. First of all, there are some well-known universities there. Texas A&M is in Corpus Christi, for example. Pan American University is, I believe, in Brownsville. I could be wrong on that. Maybe it's in Harlingen or something. But probably a lot more interesting than that is the actual location of the Texas McAllen mission. So San Antonio is like on the bottom of the state. Texas McAllen is below that. So we're way in the south. If you think of a picture of Texas, you know how it's got like this little square part on top that's like a handle, and then it's got something like this, and then at the bottom there's this tiny little like peninsula. So we are that peninsula right there. And what that means is that in many of the cities in the area, most people don't even speak English. You get down to Laredo or Brownsville, and everyone speaks Spanish. And there's a handful of English speakers, but for example, you'll have a Spanish steak, and in the Spanish steak, or you'll have a steak, and in the steak there is one English-speaking ward, and like 12 Spanish-speaking wards. And so all of the English speakers from the area will go to that one ward from the entire city. It might be a city of 200,000 people, but they'll all go to that one ward. And then there's a lot of other Spanish stakes or wards and branches. So that's an interesting thing. And I mentioned before that all missionaries in the McAllen mission, this is unique to McAllen. There are only a few missions, I think, that do this currently. But all missionaries learn both Spanish and English. And that's actually really nice as a missionary because you never have to give a referral because you can't speak the language. So you can contact someone in Spanish 1 second and in English the other second. And it only makes sense this way because some households, people like, we would teach, there was a member family once, I remember we did a lesson, and the husband only speaks English and the wife only speaks Spanish. How that works, I don't know. But and so you would almost like have to be bilingual to teach these people. We even ran into one person at one point who told us that he neither spoke Spanish nor English, and that there were, or rather that there were words in Spanish that he didn't know and words that he didn't know in English, and like he didn't have a complete vocabulary in either one. So that's how mixed the languages are down there and the culture. And so the result is that in some ways it feels kind of like Mexico. In two of my areas, in Brownsville and in Laredo, they're both right on the border of the Rio Grande, so you can see the river sometimes from the area. My apartment was 6, 7, maybe 8 blocks from the river, maybe like 10 or 12, but in Laredo. And there's a lot of great things about that, and you know, at the same time, there's some things that are a little scary, like Border Patrol was there a lot. That wasn't super scary, but sometimes there would be violence on the other side of the border or something. We never. I felt quite protected and quite safe on my mission, and I'm not aware of any missionaries ever having had like any issues with being accosted or anything in the mission. But it is interesting because it's on the border, and there's a lot going on right now on that border. But great people, very bilingual. The food is great because again, you're getting the Tex-Mex, and it's a lot of Mexican food. But you've also got people from Honduras and El Salvador. All of the Hondureños that we met were just really funny people. I don't know why. But also very nice. And the people down there are very nice. People who have absolutely no interest in our message, who are staunchly, well, many people are Catholic, but whatever their religion is, you'll find that the Spanish speakers in particular, they'll be very nice to you. If you are down there, you might be passing by and they'll be having a pachanga, which means barbecue, and they'll invite you over to come get a taco or something. I should explain, by the way, taco is not what we think of it in America as being. We think of this hard shell thing with ground beef, but actually in like Mexican cuisine, a taco just means meat in some sort of tortilla. And usually the tortillas are soft. So you can have a flour tortilla and meat, and you might think of that as a burrito, but it's a taco to them. And a burrito is kind of something different that has to do with beans, I think. But so those are all interesting things. And I guess maybe the last thing I'll explain is really quickly just the mission geography. Oh yeah, and one or two other interesting stories. So it starts up around Corpus Christi, which is the north part of the mission, and then it's kind of a triangle. So you go down to the west, and there's Laredo. And Laredo, I don't know, it's kind of a famous town in some ways. There's a song about it on the streets of Laredo, old country song or folk song. And Laredo is all Spanish speaking, basically. It's right on the border again. And I served there. That was where I served with my cousin. And great place. And then you go east, and you've got Brownsville. So the mission is like this triangle. And the north side is largely English speaking. And you actually have some Filipinos who speak Tagalog as well. So up in Corpus Christi, for example, I taught very few lessons in Spanish, and I taught probably at least as many Filipino investigators as I did like Mexican or Hispanic investigators, which was interesting. Great people. Good food, by the way, the Filipino food. But and then once you get into what we call the valley, then I'm not sure why we call that the valley, because there are no mountains and not really much room for a valley down there. It's very flat, but then everyone speaks Spanish, or at least there's a lot of Spanish, and you've got a good mix of English and Spanish. You can still find plenty of people who speak English, but in large part, especially as you get closer to the border, most people speak Spanish. So. One other thing about the McAllen mission is that it contains a very notorious location, South Padre Island and North Padre Island. North Padre is not infamous. South Padre is where all of the spring breakers from colleges throughout the U.S. go to party during spring break. And it's kind of a wild place, and missionaries are never allowed to set foot there. So needless to say, I did not serve on South Padre, but I did serve on North Padre at one point. So it's still Padre Island, but they're kind of divided by this, I don't know, it's pretty hard to get from North Padre to South Padre. I think there might be a highway going down there, but North Padre is just a bunch of fairly affluent white people for the most part, demographically speaking. There are probably some, it's probably a little more mixed than that, but housing in South Texas is really cheap, so actually you can get a really nice house on North Padre, and it doesn't cost that much. Yeah, so North Padre, it's just like kind of like the place where you would move after you've made a reasonable amount of money to go retire or something. Nice place. There were some members on the island who were super cool. We would teach some of our investigators in their homes. And then, well, by that is Flower Bluff, which was the part of Corpus I served in. Great area.